In life, we often dream of perfection, a successful career, a happy family, and a bright future. But sometimes, perfection is just the facade of a story filled with contradictions and struggles. Ethan Walker, a highly successful CEO, has it all: power, wealth, and fame. But behind that cold exterior, there's a man wrestling with guilt, love, and family. Will he be able to balance the demands of his empire and the needs of those he loves? Is everything he's built truly worth the sacrifices he's made? Ethan Walker, 35, stands by the window of his sleek office, gazing out over downtown Manhattan. The lights of the city are dazzling, but his face shows no joy. Ethan Walker stood in his office, looking out over the sprawling cityscape of Manhattan. The lights twinkled below, a reminder of his empire and all that he had achieved. But tonight they seemed distant, as though the city itself was a cold stranger to him. The towering skyscrapers, the hustle and bustle of the streets far below, everything that once inspired him now felt like a blur at 35. Ethan had become the epitome of success in the tech world. CEO of Walker Technologies, his company was a leader in AI innovation, valued at billions. He had everything: a powerful position, money, respect, but none of it brought him peace. And tonight, peace was all he wanted. He had been running from his personal life for years, burying his emotions beneath the weight of his career. But tonight, as he stood there, he couldn't escape the truth any longer. His phone buzzed on his desk, snapping him from his thoughts. It was a message from his sister, Lily Walker. "Ethan, I know you're busy, but Mum needs you. She's been asking for you. I can't do this alone." Ethan stared at the screen, the words hitting him like a punch to the gut. His mother, Margaret Walker, had been battling cancer for over a year. The treatments weren't working, and doctors had given her only a few months to live. He had been ignoring the situation for too long, telling himself he'd visit her soon, telling himself that work was more important, that his legacy needed to be secured. But now, as he read Lily's message, he couldn't lie to himself anymore. The truth was inescapable. He had been absent. Absence in the most crucial moments. While he had been conquering the business world, his mother had been slipping away. Ethan grabs his jacket and heads toward the window. Looking out at the city, his face filled with conflict, Ethan leaned against the glass, the cold window pressing against his palm. He felt the weight of the decision he had to make. His company, Walker Technologies, was on the verge of a major international expansion. His investors, employees, and board members were all counting on him to lead them to the next big thing. His business was his life, the one thing that had always been there for him, the one thing he knew how to manage. But his family, his mother, that had always been a different story. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He couldn't do it anymore. He couldn't keep hiding behind the facade of business. He needed to make a choice, the choice that would define everything. Ethan picks up the phone, his hand shaking slightly as he dials his mother's number. He stared at the phone in his hand, his heart pounding. He almost didn't want to make the call. He feared what he would hear on the other end. But he dialed it anyway. "Hello." His mother's frail voice came through the line. "Mum, it's me. I'm coming to see you." Ethan's voice cracked, the guilt overwhelming him. "Ethan, you're too busy, ... But I'm glad you called. Come soon. I miss you." Her voice was weak, but filled with the love only a mother could have. She was trying to make him feel better, but he knew the truth. She didn't have much time left. As he listened to her, The weight of his neglect settled deep into his chest. He had failed her. All the late nights, all the meetings, all the pressure, he had allowed it to drown out the most important thing in his life. His family. Ethan stands by the window again, his reflection merging with the skyline outside. He set the phone down and turned back to face the city. His mind was racing. He had always believed that his success would make everything else fall into place, that wealth and recognition would be enough. But now, as he faced the reality of his family's unraveling, he realized how wrong he had been. The city outside, with its bright lights and endless possibilities, felt like a distant dream now. The world that had once given him so much energy and motivation now felt empty. The one thing he hadn't been able to build was the one thing he desperately needed now. Ethan stares at the city below, his face reflecting the internal battle he's about to face. Ethan Walker sits at his desk, staring at the computer screen, his mind still reeling from the call with his mother. The lights of Manhattan glow through the windows, but Ethan's office feels distant and cold. Ethan rubbed his eyes, trying to shake off the heaviness weighing on him. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, but the words he needed to write didn't come. Today, for the first time in a long time, work felt like a meaningless distraction. The financial reports, the international expansions, the meetings with investors, none of it mattered right now. His mother, the woman who had raised him single-handedly, was slipping away, and he was sitting here, buried in spreadsheets. It felt wrong. The phone on his desk rang, pulling him from his thoughts. He glanced at the caller ID and saw it was his sister, Lily Walker. Taking a deep breath, he answered, "Lily." "Ethan, where are you?" Lily's voice came through sharp, but tinged with concern. "Mum's been asking for you. We really need you here." Ethan clenched his jaw, guilt flooding his chest again. "I know, Lily, I'm sorry. I'll be there tomorrow." There was a pause on the other end. Lily sighed. "You've been saying that for weeks, Ethan, but she's getting worse. You're not going to have any more time to fix this." Her voice broke slightly, but she quickly recovered. "I just need you to be here. For her. For us." Ethan's mind raced. He couldn't escape this anymore. Lily was right. He had been postponing his visit, convincing himself that there was always a tomorrow, always something more important. But he couldn't deny it any longer. He had to go. His mother needed him now. But even as he made the decision, a part of him still resisted. His company, his empire, was on the verge of a major breakthrough. The deal with an international investor was just days away from being finalized, and it could change everything for Walker Technologies. Ethan stands up, pacing around his office. The weight of the decision presses down on him. Could he leave everything to Lily and the rest of the family? Could he risk abandoning his responsibilities to the company just as it was about to expand globally? The thought of leaving his work at a critical juncture made him uneasy. But then the image of his mother, frail and weak, flashed in his mind again. "I've sacrificed everything for this," Ethan muttered under his breath. He had worked tirelessly for years to build the empire that was now at his fingertips, but in doing so, he had pushed aside the people who mattered most. He exhaled sharply and picked up the phone again. This time, it wasn't his sister. It was Clara Davis, the head of the board at Walker Technologies. "Ethan, I need to know if we're moving forward with the international expansion deal. The investors are getting impatient." Clara's voice was cool, almost detached, a reminder that business couldn't wait for personal matters. Ethan hesitated. The expansion deal was a milestone, one that had the potential to catapult the company to new heights. Yet, As he spoke to Clara, he realized just how much of his life he had allowed to be consumed by work. His mother was dying, and here he was, debating whether to make a simple decision that could bring the company millions. "Clara, I'll have to review the final details tomorrow," Ethan said, his voice firm but distracted. "I've got some personal matters to attend to." "Personal matters," Clara repeated, her tone not masking the impatience. "Ethan, you've known about this deal for months. I'm sure your personal matters can wait." Her words stung. He wanted to lash out, to tell her that nothing was more important than his family, but he couldn't. Walker Technologies was built on his sacrifices, and those sacrifices were paying off. He couldn't throw it all away, could he? But as Clara continued speaking, Ethan found his mind drifting away from the conversation. He thought about his mother, lying in that hospital bed, fragile and weak. What if he lost her before he ever made things right? Ethan ends the call with Clara. He slumps down in his chair, staring at the phone. The decision was clear now. His family needed him. The company could survive without him for a while, but his family wouldn't. He stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the city that he had conquered. Was it all worth it? The money, the power, the respect, none of it could replace what he had been neglecting all these years. He grabbed his coat, slammed the door behind him, and walked out of the office. The first step towards reconciling his personal and professional life had been taken. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't going to be pretty, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't run away from his family anymore. Ethan arrives at the hospital, his heart heavy with anticipation. He steps off the elevator and walks down the hallway, passing nurses and doctors who hardly notice his presence. As he walked into his mother's room, he saw her lying there, pale and frail, surrounded by machines that beeped softly. The sight of her weakened state almost brought him to his knees. He hadn't seen her in weeks, and now, seeing her like this, so vulnerable, so frail, hit him harder than he expected. Ethan stood by the door for a moment, unsure of what to say. Lily was sitting at the bedside, her face tired but loving. She looked up and smiled when she saw him. "You made it." Lily's voice was gentle, but Ethan could hear the relief in it. Ethan nodded, walking toward his mother's bed. He gently took her hand, feeling the warmth of her skin beneath his fingers. For a moment, everything else faded. It was just the two of them, mother and son. "Mum, I'm here now," Ethan whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. Margaret's eyes fluttered open. A faint smile crossed her lips as she looked up at him. "I knew you'd come. I knew you'd come back to me." Tears stung his eyes, but he held them back. He had made the right choice. The world outside could wait. His mother needed him now. Ethan sits in the sterile hospital room, his mother resting peacefully beside him. The low hum of medical equipment fills the silence, but for once, it feels like the calm he's needed. His sister Lily is quietly watching over their mother. Ethan's thoughts, however, are still occupied with the enormity of the decision ahead. He is home, but his company's future still hangs in the balance. Ethan sat in the small, uncomfortable chair next to his mother's bed. His gaze kept flicking from her frail figure to the window, where the city outside seemed to carry on in its never-ending motion. It felt like the world outside had no idea of the war raging within him. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't thinking about projections, growth, or revenue streams. He was thinking about Margaret Walker, the woman who had raised him, the woman who had been the foundation of his life, and now At the very end of it, he realized how little time they truly had left. Lily finally broke the silence. "Ethan, you've been quiet. What's going on with Walker Technologies? Is everything on track?" Her voice was cautious, as if probing for his thoughts, but not wanting to press too hard. Ethan rubbed his eyes, as though trying to physically shake off the thoughts of the company. "The expansion project in Europe is moving forward. The investors are pushing for a decision on the international deal by the end of the week, but I don't know, Lily. I just don't know." Lily raised an eyebrow, her expression softening. "You're here with Mum now, and that's what matters. You need to think about what you want, not just about the company." He nodded, but the weight of it all didn't feel like it could be shaken so easily. Walker Technologies, the company that had consumed his life for the past decade, was on the brink of an international breakthrough. But his family, his mother, was here, fighting for breath. And the world he had built was slowly losing its meaning. A knock at the door. A tall, sharply dressed woman enters, holding a folder in her hand. Her presence immediately fills the room with an air of authority. Ethan turned toward the door to see Clara Davis, the head of the board at Walker Technologies, stepping into the room with a confident, almost businesslike demeanor. Clara, in her early 40s, was a powerhouse in the tech world. A former investor turned business mogul, she had a reputation for being ruthless, intelligent, and always a few steps ahead of everyone else. Her arrival, however, felt like an intrusion. For the first time in years, Ethan wanted to escape from the business world. But Clara wasn't one to ignore when things were falling apart. "Ethan, I had to come. The board's getting restless, and we need your final decision on the expansion deal. The investors are waiting." Ethan stood up, irritation flashing in his eyes, but he quickly masked it with a practiced calm. "Clara, I don't have time for this. My mom is here, and I understand, but this is critical." Clara cut him off, her voice firm but not unkind. "This isn't just about you anymore. You've built an empire, and you can't let it fall apart just because of a personal issue. I know your family matters, but what about your legacy? What about the company?" Ethan clenched his jaw. Clara's words, though true, felt cold. He had spent years building this legacy, but in this moment, it seemed like an empty shell. He had let the company consume him, and now, as his mother's life was slipping away, he couldn't help but wonder, was it all worth it? "Clara, you don't understand," Ethan said quietly, his voice shaking with frustration. "It's not just about a deal. It's about my family. My mother, she's not going to be here much longer." Clara stepped closer, her gaze softening just slightly. "Ethan, I'm not trying to make things harder, but you're too good at this. Too good at pushing everything else aside for the next big deal." She paused, letting the words sink in. "But don't let this company be the thing that makes you forget what's truly important." Clara hands Ethan the folder. He takes it reluctantly, flipping it open to reveal details about the international expansion and investor meetings. There it was, everything he had worked for, all laid out in front of him, but it felt like an illusion. He had spent so much time making sure Walker Technologies succeeded that he had lost sight of what he truly wanted, to be there for the people he loved. "You need to make a choice," Ethan, Clara said, her tone softer now. "This deal can take Walker Technologies to new heights, but you can't run both worlds at once." Ethan stood in silence, staring at the folder in his hands. He knew what he had to do, but he wasn't ready to make that decision just yet. Later that evening, Ethan returns to his mother's bedside. The hospital room is quiet. The hum of the machines almost a comforting sound in the stillness. Ethan stood by his mother's bed again, watching her sleep. Her breathing was slow, shallow. Lily had gone home for the night, leaving Ethan to sit with her. "Mum, I'm here," he whispered, his voice trembling. He gently took her hand in his. Margaret's eyes fluttered open, and she gave him a weak smile. "I knew you'd come back, Ethan. I knew you would." He felt a lump in his throat, fighting the tears. How had he let it come to this? "I'm sorry, Mum. I'm sorry I wasn't here when you needed me." His voice cracked with guilt. Margaret squeezed his hand, her voice barely audible. "Ethan, you've done more for me than you know. I'm proud of you, no matter what. But you need to remember, family is what matters." Ethan leaned in, kissing her forehead gently. "I promise, Mum. I promise I'll get it right this time." For the first time in months, Ethan felt something shift inside him. He had been so focused on building an empire that he forgot about the foundation it was built on his family. Ethan's face shows determination as he looks out of the hospital room window, the weight of his choices heavy on his shoulders. The decision was no longer just about business. It was about finding balance. Ethan sits in a small, dimly lit cafe in downtown Manhattan, a coffee cup in front of him, untouched. His mind is elsewhere. Clara Davis had left him with a final ultimatum: make the decision to move forward with the international expansion deal or risk losing everything he had built. Ethan stared at the coffee, the steam rising from it like the unresolved tension inside him. What was he doing? He had spent the last decade building Walker Technologies, driving the company forward with relentless ambition. But now, in this moment of crisis, he was forced to confront something deeper than business decisions. His life, his priorities, everything he had worked for, was it worth the price? As he absent-mindedly stirred the coffee, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. It was a message from Lily Walker. "Ethan, there's something we need to talk about. It's about Mum. I found some old papers, something that could change everything." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. What could Lily have found? The last thing he wanted was more family drama, but the tone of Lily's message was urgent. He quickly typed a response. "I'll be there in 30 minutes. Ethan arrives at his family's apartment, his mind racing with anxiety. The elevator ride up feels like the longest of his life. The doors opened with a soft chime, and Ethan stepped into the apartment, immediately hearing the soft murmur of voices coming from the living room. Lily was sitting on the couch, holding a stack of old documents, her face drawn with concern. "What's going on?" Ethan asked, his voice tight with tension. Lily looked up, her eyes filled with worry. "Ethan, I found these papers in Mum's things." She handed him a folder, the edges frayed with age. Ethan hesitated for a moment before taking it. He opened the folder, his eyes scanning the papers. They were medical records, old ones, from when their mother was first diagnosed with cancer several years ago. But that wasn't what caught his attention. There, in the middle of the papers, was a name that sent a cold shiver down his spine. John Carter, John Carter, a name from his past. The man who had been Margaret Walker's first husband. The man, Ethan had been told, had died in a car accident before he was born. But these papers, these were telling a different story. "Lily, what is this?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lily bit her lip, clearly struggling to find the words. "I don't know, but it doesn't make sense. Mum never mentioned him again after he died. Or so we thought. Ethan sat down, his mind spinning. Everything he knew about his family, the story of his mother's sacrifices, the reason she had raised him alone, the life he had built was now in question. Who was John Carter? Why had his mother hidden him from them all these years? Flashback, a quiet suburban street in the early 1980s. A young Margaret Walker, in her 20s, is seen smiling and walking with a man who Ethan now knows as John Carter. Ethan's face pales as he reads the rest of the documents. As Ethan read through the rest of the records, the truth became more disturbing. It wasn't just that John Carter had been alive. He had been involved in their mother's life right up until the point she had become pregnant with Ethan Dot. And then there was another revelation. John Carter had left a substantial sum of money for Ethan and Lily. This money, it was meant for us. Ethan muttered under his breath, disbelief creeping into his voice. Lily nodded slowly. It looks like it. It was supposed to go into a trust fund for both of us when we turned 18, but Mum never mentioned it. I never knew. Ethan leaned back in his chair, overwhelmed. Everything he thought he knew about his family, about his mother, was crumbling. What had she hidden from them all these years? Why hadn't she shared this with him? Scene, Ethan takes a deep breath. His thoughts a chaotic whirlwind. This was bigger than just an old secret. This was about his entire foundation, his family. His mother had been keeping secrets, and now those secrets were beginning to tear apart the very life he had worked so hard to create. Ethan stood up abruptly, pacing across the room. His mind was racing. If his mother had been hiding this for years, what else had she kept from them? Had John Carter been part of her decision to leave her old life behind? Had his mother truly been as selfless as Ethan had always believed? Ethan, are you okay? Lily's voice broke through his thoughts. He stopped, turning to face her. No, Lily, I'm not okay. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident on his face. This changes everything. We need to talk to Mum, Lily said quietly. We will, but not yet. Not until I understand why she kept this from us. Later that evening, Ethan returns to his apartment, holding the folder tightly in his hands. As he sat down at his desk, Ethan spread the documents out in front of him. The weight of the truth was suffocating. He couldn't think clearly. All the business decisions, all the pressure, it all felt so trivial now. This revelation about his mother was like a bomb that had just exploded in his life, and he wasn't sure how to pick up the pieces. There was a knock at his door. Ethan barely moved, too consumed with his thoughts. Ethan, open up, came the voice from the other side. It was Clara Davis, his business partner and the woman who had been pushing him to make the decision about the international deal. Not now. Clara, Ethan muttered to himself. But Clara wasn't going to let him ignore this. She knocked again, more urgently this time. Ethan opens the door, his face tired and filled with frustration. What is it, Clara? He asked, his voice sharp. Clara stepped inside without waiting for a response, holding a stack of papers in her hand. The investors are getting restless, Ethan. We need you to make a decision. Ethan didn't say anything for a moment. He just stared at her, the weight of the moment bearing down on him. He wasn't sure if he could handle both his family's crisis and the company's future. But one thing was clear. He couldn't run from either of them anymore. I'm not sure I can do this anymore, Clara, Ethan finally said, his voice softer now. Clara narrowed her eyes. What are you saying? You're telling me now that you're going to walk away from everything you've built. Ethan sighed deeply. I don't know what I'm saying yet. He turned away from her, looking back at the documents on his desk. But I need time. Time to figure this out. Ethan's apartment, the morning after the discovery. The light outside is harsh, and the city below feels colder than usual. Ethan stands by his window, staring out into the busy streets of Manhattan. His mind is racing. Ethan hadn't slept. The weight of everything the documents Lily had found, the secrets his mother had kept, and the pressure of the deal with the investors had kept him awake all night. He was now standing at the window, watching the city below, but none of it felt familiar anymore. It was as though he was staring at a world he didn't belong to, a world that seemed so far removed from the man who had once lived for success. Flashback to Ethan's past. A young boy running through a park with his mother, Margaret, smiling and holding his hand. The memory feels distant, almost foreign to him now. But even the memories felt distant, like echoes of another lifetime. When had it all become about money, power, and expansion? He had been so consumed with creating something bigger than himself that he had neglected the people who mattered the most. His phone buzzed again, pulling him from his thoughts. Another message from Lily. Ethan, I know you're dealing with a lot right now, but Mum's condition has worsened. She's asking for you. I don't know how much longer we have. The words hit him like a physical blow. His mother was deteriorating, and he had no idea how much time was left. The guilt that had been creeping up on him for days now felt like it was suffocating him. He couldn't afford to keep ignoring it. The business deal, the investors, they would always be there. But his family wouldn't. Not for long. Ethan's office at Walker Technologies, later that afternoon. Clara Davis is sitting across from him, her usual confident demeanor unwavering. Ethan sat at his desk, but his mind wasn't focused on the presentations in front of him. He had a meeting with Clara about the international deal, but the conversation felt like a distant hum in the background. He was losing his grip on everything. Ethan, we can't keep stalling. The investors are getting anxious, and this deal is slipping through our fingers, Clara said, her voice sharp but not unkind. You've worked too hard for this. You're not going to let it all fall apart now, are you? Ethan stared at the documents on his desk but didn't see them. His hands shook slightly, and his throat felt tight. Was he really willing to sacrifice his family for this deal? The question gnawed at him. Clara, I can't focus on this right now. Ethan's voice was low, weary. My mother, she's getting worse. I need to be with her. Clara didn't flinch. She didn't need to. She knew how to keep her emotions in check. Ethan, I understand your family matters, but the reality is, we're in the middle of a crucial time for the company. Clara leaned forward, her eyes piercing. You can't afford to let your personal life derail everything you've worked for. Ethan's gaze hardened. His entire body was on edge, the tension rising. And what if I let it? His voice was quiet but intense. What if I put my family first, Clara? What if I walk away from all of this? He motioned to the papers, the folders, the endless projections of success. What happens then? Clara's eyes softened, but only for a brief moment. She was no fool. Ethan Walker was her partner, but he was also a man who had always placed business over everything else. She knew this wasn't just about his mother, it was about something deeper. You have to decide, Ethan, she said softly, but with an edge that was still sharp. You've been a leader for years, But leadership isn't just about making the hard calls at work. It's about balance. It's about knowing when to fight for what you want and when to walk away. Ethan leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples, the weight of it all threatening to crush him. Family versus business. Could he really have both? Could he really do what he needed to do for both without losing everything? That evening, Ethan is at the hospital. The sterile scent of disinfectant fills the room, mixing with the faint sound of machines beeping. His mother, Margaret, is lying unconscious in the bed, her face pale but peaceful. Ethan walked in quietly, careful not to wake his mother. He sat beside her, taking her frail hand in his. The coldness of her skin made him feel sick to his stomach. This woman had raised him alone, had made every sacrifice for him. And now, here she was, clinging to life, while he had been too wrapped up in his own success to notice. A young Ethan in his mother's arms, smiling and laughing. Margaret's love and sacrifice are clear in this fleeting, joyful moment. As a child, he had always seen his mother as a symbol of strength. But now, the woman who had once been his rock was fading, and Ethan felt more lost than ever. "I'm sorry, Mum. I don't know how I let it get this far." His voice cracked, barely above a whisper. Margaret stirred slightly, her eyes opening to meet his. She smiled faintly, the corners of her mouth lifting in a way that still held warmth despite her condition. "Ethan, I know you've done your best. I've always known. But you need to remember what matters most." Ethan's heart clenched. He hadn't been there when she needed him, and now he couldn't get back those lost years. "I'll fix this, Mum, I promise." The next morning, Ethan is back in his office. Clara has been texting him non-stop, and the pressure of the international deal is building again. The balance between family and business is still in question. Ethan sits at his desk, staring at the phone in his hand. The text from Clara reads, "The investors need your decision by noon today, Ethan. We've come this far. Don't let it slip away now." He puts the phone down. The clock is ticking, and he knows that whatever choice he makes now will be irreversible. He cannot keep living in limbo, torn between his past and his future. Ethan's hand hovers over his phone, considering his next move. What if he chose to walk away? Walk away from the deal, the company, the pressure. But could he really leave it all behind? Ethan stands up from his desk, walking toward the window. He stares out, his reflection merging with the cityscape. The world outside seems so distant, but the path he must take is now clear. He has to make a choice, and this time it's not just about business. Ethan's apartment, early morning. The city outside is just waking up, the streets slowly filling with activity as the sun begins to rise. Ethan stands by his window, the weight of the world on his shoulders. His phone rests on the desk in front of him, with Clara's latest message flashing on the screen. The message from Clara Davis was short but to the point. Decision needed by noon. The investors are waiting. We've worked too hard to let this slip away. Ethan took a deep breath and ran his hand through his hair, staring out into the city that felt so far away from where he needed to be. The pressure from the business, the looming decision about the international deal, all felt overwhelming. But there was something more pressing, something far more important. His family, his mother, Margaret, was slipping away. Every day he spent in the office, every deal he signed, felt like a betrayal. And now he couldn't keep running from the truth. He had to choose the business or his family. Ethan picks up the phone and dials Lily's number. It rings twice before she picks up. "Ethan, is everything okay?" Lily's voice is calm, but there's an underlying tension. She knows what's at stake. "Lily, I'm coming home today." Ethan's voice is firm, though his heart is heavy. "I've made my decision." Lily is silent for a moment. Ethan can almost hear her thinking through the implications of his words. "You're really going to do this, aren't you? You're walking away from everything you've built." Ethan closes his eyes, feeling a sense of finality in his decision. "Yes, I am. I can't keep living like this, Lily. The business is everything I've ever known, but it's not what I want anymore. Not without family. Not without Mum." Lily sighs with relief, and Ethan can almost hear the smile in her voice. "I'm proud of you, Ethan. You're doing the right thing. I know it's hard, but you're doing it for the right reasons." Scene. Ethan hangs up the phone, the decision made. He walks into his living room and looks at the framed photo of him with his mother and Lily from years ago, when life seemed simpler. The photo reminds him of who he truly is, not the CEO of Walker Technologies, but a son and a brother. Ethan arrives at the hospital later that day. The sun is now high in the sky, casting a bright light over everything, but it feels muted, as though he's walking in slow motion. The hospital's sterile. Antiseptic air hits him as soon as he walks through the doors. The usual hustle and bustle of nurses and doctors fades into the background. He's here for one thing: to make amends, to finally be the son his mother needed, and to face the reality of the choices he's made. He walks down the hall to his mother's room, his footsteps slow, deliberate. His heart beats louder in his chest with every step. He knows that when he enters this room, there will be no going back. As he reaches the door to his mother's room, he takes a deep breath and pushes it open. Margaret Walker lies there, frail and weak, but still holding on to life. Her once vibrant face is now pale, the familiar warmth of her smile gone, replaced with the calmness of someone who knows their time is running out. Ethan sits beside her bed, taking her hand in his voice trembling. "Mum, I'm here." His voice is low and filled with emotion, barely above a whisper. Margaret's eyes flutter open, and she smiles weakly. "Ethan, I knew you'd come. I knew you'd finally come back." Tears threaten to well in Ethan's eyes, but he fights them back. He leans forward, gently kissing her forehead. "I'm sorry, Mum. I'm sorry I wasn't here when you needed me. I let everything else come before you. But I'm here now." Margaret squeezes his hand. "Ethan, I've always known you were doing your best. You were just chasing something bigger. But family, that's what matters most." Ethan feels a knot in his throat. This was the moment he had been dreading, but also the one he knew he needed. "I know, Mom. I know now. Everything I've been working for, it's nothing if I don't have you." She smiles again, this time more brightly, though faint. "You've made your decision, haven't you?" Ethan nods, his voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I've walked away from it all. The deal, the expansion, everything. I'm done hiding behind work. I'm going to be here for you, for Lily, for family. That's what matters." Margaret's smile widens. "That's all I ever wanted, Ethan. I'm proud of you. You finally understand what's truly important." Ethan sits there for what feels like hours, simply holding his mother's hand, feeling the weight of everything he had neglected, but also the peace that came with knowing he had finally made the right choice. He stays with her until the late evening, when Lily comes back to the hospital and the two of them quietly talk about everything they've been through. Lily, relieved to see her brother finally prioritizing family, sits beside him as they share memories and promises of a future with their mother, no matter how short that time might be. The next morning, Ethan wakes up early, and the realization of his decision hits him fully. He has given up a lifetime of ambition, but for the first time in years, he feels free. As he steps out of the hospital, the city outside seems different now, as though it's waiting for him to finally take control of his life. The weight of the international deal no longer hangs over him. His business empire is still there, but Ethan Walker has chosen something bigger than business. He's chosen family. Ethan stands on a balcony, the city before him, his future uncertain but his heart clearer than it has ever been. Ethan's apartment, the morning after his decision. The city outside seems the same, busy, vibrant, indifferent. But inside, Ethan feels the weight of his choices pressing down on him, as if he's just stepped into a new life. Ethan sat at his kitchen table, the bright morning light spilling through the windows. He hadn't felt this calm in weeks, maybe months. The decision to walk away from the international expansion deal had been hard, but now that it was made, the anxiety that had been gnawing at him for so long had finally begun to ease. He hadn't heard from Clara Davis yet. He knew she would be furious, but he couldn't bring himself to care anymore. The constant pressure, the endless demands from investors and employees, it all felt so insignificant compared to what truly mattered. Family. Ethan receives a message on his phone. It's from Clara. The message was brief. "We need to talk. I understand your decision, but we need to discuss the consequences." Ethan read it and sighed, his stomach knotting. The consequences. He already knew what they were. The investors would be furious, the company would lose a massive opportunity, and his reputation within the industry would take a hit. But none of that mattered to him now. His phone buzzed again. It was a call from Lily. "Ethan, how are you?" Her voice sounded more relaxed than it had in a long time. "I'm good, just processing everything," Ethan replied, his voice calm but still full of weight. "I'm still figuring out how to move forward." "You've done the right thing," Lily said softly. "But now you need to think about what's next. We can't go back to what it was, and Mum... She needs you more than ever." Ethan nodded, though Lily couldn't see him. "I know. I've been thinking about that." Later that day, Ethan drives to his family's house. He pulls up in front of the familiar brownstone, the one he had spent so many childhood days in, and feels a deep sense of connection to the place. The house feels different now, the warmer, more welcoming. Family is all that remains. Ethan knocks on the door and Lily answers. Her smile is warm and she pulls him into a tight hug. "I'm glad you're here," she says, stepping back to let him in. Ethan smiles but can't shake the tension in his chest. "I need to talk to Mum. I need to make things right." Lily nods, leading him into the living room where their mother, Margaret Walker, sits in a chair by the window, looking out at the world as if she were watching the passing of time. The room is quiet, but there's an undeniable warmth in the air, one that Ethan hasn't felt in years. "Mum," Ethan says, his voice breaking slightly. Margaret turns to look at him, her face softening as she sees him. "Ethan." Her voice is weak, but there's a smile on her face that brings tears to his eyes. "I knew you'd come back. I always knew you would." Ethan walks toward her, kneeling down beside her chair, taking her hand gently in his. "I'm sorry, Mom. I've made so many mistakes. I've put everything else first. Everything except you." He pauses, swallowing hard. "I don't know how I let it get this far, but I promise I'll be here now." Margaret smiles softly, tears welling in her eyes. "I've always been proud of you, Ethan. Always. But now, you need to remember what truly matters. Not the business. Not the empire. Family. We are what grounds you. You don't need to keep running." Ethan nods, feeling the weight of her words. Family. The word resonates in him in a way it never had before. All this time, he had been running from something, never truly realizing what he was running toward. Later that evening, after a quiet dinner with Lily and Margaret, Ethan is sitting alone on the porch, looking up at the stars. He's contemplating his future, unsure of what comes next. He knew he couldn't return to the life he had before. The business, the relentless pursuit of success, it was a hollow pursuit if it didn't have family as its foundation. But what now? Could he truly start over? Could he walk away from the empire he had spent so many years building? His phone buzzes again, pulling him from his thoughts. Clara Davis. This time, he knows he can't avoid her. He answers the call. "Clara." "Ethan." Clara's voice is steady, but there's an edge to it. "I won't lie to you, I'm furious. You've put the entire company at risk. But I respect your decision. However, you need to understand something. This isn't just about you anymore. It's about all of us. We have to come together and figure out what comes next." Ethan listens, taking in her words. Clara was right. This was bigger than him. The company still needed leadership, and the choices he had made would have consequences. But he was ready for them. It was time for him to be the leader his family needed, not just the CEO of a tech empire. "I understand, Clara. I'm going to make this right. For the company, for my family, but I can't do this without the people who truly matter." He pauses. "I'm stepping away from the deal. I'll take responsibility for the fallout, but it's time for a change." There's a long silence on the other end of the phone. Finally, Clara speaks. "I'll support you, Ethan, but this isn't over. There's a lot of work to do." The following days are a whirlwind. Ethan spends hours on the phone with the board, explaining his decision and what he plans to do next. The path forward is uncertain, but the weight on his shoulders feels lighter. He knows there will be consequences, but he's ready for them. Ethan, now sitting in his mother's living room, watching as Margaret and Lily chat about old memories. For the first time in years, Ethan feels a sense of peace, something he had been chasing but never found in the fast-paced world of business. He realizes, in this quiet moment, that he doesn't need the empire he had once craved. What he needed, what he had been searching for all along, was home, family. Ethan's apartment, the morning after a long night of phone calls, meetings, and discussions with the board. The weight of his decisions lingers in the air. But there's a sense of determination in Ethan's eyes now. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the window. But Ethan didn't notice. He sat at his kitchen table, staring at the papers spread out in front of him. The numbers, the projections, the potential growth, all of it now felt irrelevant. The empire he had spent years building seemed like an afterthought, a distant part of his past. Ethan had spent the past few days negotiating with the board, explaining his decision to walk away from the international expansion deal. His decision had come with consequences some expected, others more severe than he had anticipated. Investors were angry, the The media had begun to question his leadership, and competitors were already circling like vultures. But none of that mattered anymore. His mother, Margaret Walker, had slipped into a deeper stage of her illness. Ethan had made peace with his choice to be there for her, even if it meant sacrificing the career that had defined him for so long. Family was where he needed to be, but the harsh reality was starting to hit him. The future of Walker Technologies was now uncertain. Without the deal, the company would lose its momentum, and Ethan would have to find a way to rebuild not just the business, but his own identity. Ethan walks into the office at Walker Technologies for the first time since his decision. The atmosphere is heavy with tension. Employees and managers bustle around, but their gazes linger on him, waiting to see what he will do next. As Ethan entered the office, the air felt thick, like the company was holding its breath. Clara Davis was already in the boardroom, as usual. The sharp-tongued businesswoman had made her displeasure known when he had walked away from the deal, but she had also made it clear that she would support him. For better or for worse, Clara was the first to speak when he entered. "You're here. I didn't expect that." Her voice was neutral, but there was an edge to it. "So, now what?" Ethan set his briefcase down and sat at the head of the table. He took a moment to gather his thoughts before speaking. "Now we rebuild." Clara raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "Rebuild? You've just thrown away the biggest opportunity we've ever had. Rebuilding isn't going to be easy, Ethan. You know that." Ethan looked her straight in the eye. "I know, but the company will survive. The question is, what do we want it to stand for? What do we want Walker Technologies to be about now?" Clara paused, assessing him. She knew him well enough to know that this wasn't just about business anymore. Ethan had changed, and this was a new chapter for him. She softened slightly, leaning back in her chair. "And how do we get the investors back on board?" Ethan smiled faintly. "We focus on what we do best. We innovate. We build relationships, not just deals. I want to bring people back to the heart of Walker Technologies: creativity, innovation, and family. The investors will come once they see that we've redefined ourselves." Clara nodded slowly, as if she hadn't expected this kind of answer. "That's risky, but I'll back you up. Let's see where this new vision takes us." Ethan leaned forward, the determination in his eyes now clear. "I'm done building something just to prove I can. Now I'm going to build something that matters." Later that day, Ethan meets with his team to discuss the future of Walker Technologies. The atmosphere is a mix of excitement and uncertainty, but there's a renewed sense of purpose. The meeting room was packed. Employees from various departments, tech, marketing, sales, were all gathered, waiting for Ethan to speak. He could feel the weight of their expectations. But there was something else in the air, something lighter, like they were all ready for a change. Ethan stood at the front of the room, his voice calm and steady. "We've been running a race without a finish line. We've been chasing numbers, chasing growth, but we've forgotten what makes us special." He paused, scanning the faces in the room. They were listening now, waiting for direction. Walker Technologies was founded on a vision to change the world with technology, not just to make money, but to make a difference. Ethan's voice grew more passionate. "It's time we return to that. We'll stop chasing after the biggest deals, and we'll focus on innovation, on creating products that change people's lives. And we'll make sure our employees, our families, are at the core of everything we do." A murmur of agreement spread through the room. Ethan could see the spark of excitement in their eyes. They were ready for this change. They had always believed in the company's potential, but now, with Ethan at the helm, they felt a renewed sense of purpose. Ethan continued, "I don't know what the future holds, but I know we can do this together. Let's redefine what success means for Walker Technologies." The room erupted in applause, the energy in the room shifting. For the first time in a long time, Ethan felt like he wasn't alone in this fight. His team believed in him and, more importantly, they believed in the new vision he was offering. That evening, Ethan returns home to his apartment, feeling the weight of the day's decisions, but also a sense of relief. For the first time, he felt like he was on the right path. As Ethan stepped into his apartment, he noticed the quiet around him. It felt different now, more peaceful. He sat down on the couch, his mind racing, but this time there was no pressure. There was no deal hanging over him, no overwhelming need to prove himself. His phone buzzed again. It was a message from Lily. "Ethan, Mum is asking for you again. I know it's been a long day, but she wants to see you." Ethan smiled faintly. He had spent so many years running from this. But now, he wasn't running anymore. He knew where he needed to be. He grabbed his keys and headed out the door, leaving behind the world of business and walking into the world of family, of love, of redemption. Ethan walks into his mother's room at the hospital. Margaret is awake, her eyes lighting up as she sees him. The warmth of her gaze reassures him. For the first time in a long time, Ethan feels truly at peace. "I'm here, Mom," he says, sitting down beside her, taking her hand in his. Margaret smiles faintly, her hand weak but steady. "I knew you would come back to me, Ethan. I always knew." Ethan squeezes her hand, his voice breaking. "I'm sorry I took so long, but I'm here now, and I'm not leaving again." Margaret's eyes gleam with pride. "You've made the right choice, Ethan. Family is what matters." For the first time in years, Ethan felt a sense of clarity, as though everything he had been chasing had led him to this very moment. And now, with his family by his side, he was ready to build a new future, one that mattered. Ethan's office at Walker Technologies, a week after his decision to focus on family and innovation. The office, once cold and impersonal, now feels warmer, filled with energy. Employees are buzzing with excitement as they embrace the new vision Ethan has set for the company. Ethan sat at his desk, reviewing the new company proposals. There was a fresh sense of purpose in the air at Walker Technologies. The investors might have been skeptical, but Ethan knew the company was heading in the right direction. It was no longer about competing for the biggest deal, was about creating something that mattered. As Ethan looked over the new marketing strategy, he saw the enthusiasm from his team. They were all on board with the vision to innovate not for profit, but to solve real-world problems. Walker Technologies was becoming more than just a tech giant. It was becoming a force for positive change. "We've got a long road ahead of us, but I believe in this team, and I believe in this vision," Ethan said to himself, his voice filled with conviction. Ethan meets with Clara Davis in the conference room to discuss the next steps. Clara, though still wary about the changes, can't deny the spark of enthusiasm that's returned to the company. Clara, arms crossed, sat at the head of the table, watching Ethan carefully. She had always been the more pragmatic of the two. To her, business had always been about numbers, projections, and growth. She wasn't one to invest in ideals, no matter how noble they might sound. "I'll be honest with you, Ethan, I didn't think this was going to work." I thought walking away from that deal would be the end of us. But seeing the energy in the office now, I'm starting to think you might be onto something." Clara's tone was begrudgingly respectful. Ethan smiled. "I've always believed that if we can create something that matters, success will follow. It's not about chasing the next big thing anymore. It's about making sure the next thing is worth chasing." Clara raised an eyebrow. "And how do you plan on convincing the investors? The international expansion might be off the table, but we need a new strategy. We still need their support." Ethan paused, letting the weight of her words settle in. He knew she was right. The company's future wasn't secured, yet it was fragile. And the next few moves would make all the difference. "We start by showing them that we can be more than just a tech company," Ethan said, his voice filled with confidence. "We'll focus on what sets us apart: innovation with purpose. I'm going to reach out to our biggest investors and show them how we're going to turn this vision into reality. We'll start small, with projects that make a tangible difference, and once we prove ourselves, the support will come." Clara nodded slowly, still unsure, but her expression softened. "All right, Ethan, I'm in. But you better make sure you're right about this." Ethan sits at the dinner table at his mother's house later that evening. Margaret is still weak, but she's more alert than the last time he saw her. Lily is sitting next to her, and they're all having a quiet dinner together. It's a rare moment of peace, and Ethan cherishes it. The warm light from the dining room lamp casts a soft glow on the table. For the first time in weeks, Ethan feels like he can finally breathe. His mother, though still fragile, is laughing with Lily. The bond between them, so strong and unbreakable, is something Ethan had almost forgotten. "You know, Ethan, I've been thinking," Lily said, her voice playful. "I think you've made the right decision. I mean, it's about time you slowed down a bit. You've been working non-stop for years. Don't you want to enjoy life a little?" Ethan smiled at her, but his eyes lingered on his mother, who was looking at him with a pride that made his chest swell. "I'm starting to realize that work isn't everything. It's family. It always has been." Margaret smiled softly, her eyes growing heavy as she rested her head back. "You've always been my strongest son, Ethan. But now you need to be the son that your family needs. Not just the one who provides, but the one who's there." The words hung in the air, and Ethan knew they were true. For too long, he had placed his work above everything else. But now, the truth was clear. Success was meaningless without the love and support of his family. Ethan steps outside into the cool night air, taking a deep breath. His phone buzzes with a new message. It's from one of his old mentors, James Walker, a retired tech mogul who had been a father figure to him throughout his career. "Ethan, I heard about the changes at Walker Technologies. You're not the man I remember, but I'm intrigued. Let's have a conversation soon. I think you might be onto something, but I need to know where your head is at." Ethan smiled to himself. James Walker had always been hard on him, pushing him to be the best. But now, the words he had always heard from James about leadership, vision, and finding balance felt different. Maybe he was finally starting to understand them. He typed a quick reply. "I'll take you up on that. Let's talk soon." The following week, Ethan meets with the investors. The room is tense, the air thick with anticipation. Clara is by his side, as are a few key members of his team. Ethan walks into the room, his heart beating faster than usual. The stakes are high, and he knows that if he fails, he risks losing everything. The investors, seated around the table, stare at him with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. "Gentlemen, I'm here to tell you that Walker Technologies is entering a new era." Ethan's voice is steady as he stands in front of them. "We're not just going to be another tech company chasing profits. We're going to focus on real-world solutions that make a difference. We'll still be profitable, but the difference is we'll do it with purpose." The investors exchange looks, and Clara watches closely. Ethan can feel the weight of their gaze, but he doesn't falter. This is the moment he's been waiting for. "I'm asking you to take a chance on us, to trust that we're heading in the right direction. It's time to innovate, not just for profits, but for a purpose. And that, gentlemen, is something that can't be ignored." There's silence in the room for a moment, and then one of the investors leans forward. "All right, Ethan, we'll give you one shot. Prove it." Ethan smiles, a sense of relief washing over him. This is the beginning of something new, not just for the company, but for himself. Later that night, Ethan walks out of the building, the city lights glowing in front of him. For the first time in a long time, he feels like he's on the right path. The weight of the decision to rebuild his company from the ground up is still heavy, but Ethan feels a sense of peace he hasn't known in years. His family is with him, and now, for the first time, he's choosing a future that is about more than just success. It's about legacy. As he walks through the bustling streets of Manhattan, the city feels different. The rush, the noise, the endless pursuit of success, all seems a little less important now. He's no longer chasing something outside of himself. Now, he's chasing something that truly matters. And with that realization, he takes a deep breath, knowing that the road ahead is still long, but the journey is worth it. Ethan's office, several months after the decision to change the direction of Walker Technologies. The room is now filled with a sense of peace and purpose. The buzz of the city outside seems less frantic, and the air inside his office is calm, steady, as if mirroring his own mindset. Ethan sat at his desk, reviewing the latest quarterly results. The numbers were strong, but more importantly, they were authentic. Walker Technologies had shifted its focus, and it was paying off. The company was still growing, but it was no longer about chasing profits at any cost. It was about creating solutions that truly mattered. The investors who had once been skeptical were now fully on board. The board members had backed him, trusting that his vision for a purpose-driven company would work. And it had. But it wasn't just the business that had flourished, it was his life. He could hear voices from the other side of the door, the hum of a team working together with a shared sense of excitement. Clara Davis, who had once been the voice of pragmatism and harsh business decisions, had fully embraced the new direction. She wasn't just on board, she was actively leading initiatives that were in line with the company's new values. Ethan smiled to himself. For the first time, he didn't feel like he was constantly battling the world. He was working with it. The Walker family home, a warm, cozy evening. Ethan is sitting with his mother, Margaret, who is healthier now, though still fragile. The house is filled with the comforting sounds of family Lily chatting about her day. Margaret smiling at the two of them. The Walker family had spent more time together in the past, few months than in the last decade combined. Margaret was no longer on death's doorstep. She was recovering, finding a new rhythm in life, spending time with the family she had once felt so distant from. She had been the rock, the constant in Ethan's life. But now she had her son back, and that was something they both cherished. "You've done something incredible, Ethan," Margaret said one evening as they sat together in the living room. not just for the company, but for yourself and for us. I'm so proud of you." Ethan looked at her, his heart full. "I couldn't have done it without you, Mum. You taught me what matters most. And for too long, I didn't listen." Margaret reached out and squeezed his hand. "You did what you had to do. We all make choices in life, but it's how we choose to live with those choices that matters. You've chosen wisely, Ethan. You've finally found your way." Walker Technologies, a year later. Ethan stands at the front of a conference room, addressing the entire company. The energy in the room is palpably, everyone is engaged, excited for the future. Ethan stood before his employees, the very people who had helped him turn his vision into reality. The room was filled with enthusiasm, and he could sense that they believed in the mission. Today, Walker Technologies stands as a leader, not just in the tech industry, but in the movement to create purpose-driven innovations. Our company is more than just about profits. It's about changing lives, making a difference, and staying true to our values. The applause was loud, and Ethan could feel the pride in the room. He had made the right decision. It wasn't just about building an empire, it was about leaving a legacy. And the legacy he was leaving wasn't one of cold, indifferent success, but one of purpose and impact. Ethan walking out of the office, the city lights twinkling in the distance. He stops for a moment, looking out at the skyline, his thoughts still. But this time, there's no rush, no frantic pace to his thoughts. He feels at peace. He didn't need to prove anything anymore. He had learned that life wasn't about what you could accumulate, but about what you could give back. He had found balance, something he had longed for but never truly believed was possible. The company was thriving. His relationships were healing, and most importantly, he was content. He had faced the hard truth that success in business meant nothing without the love and support of those who mattered most. And now he had both. Ethan meets with his mother and sister in a small cafe. Just the three of them, talking about the future. The cafe is warm, the sunlight streaming through the windows, a symbol of the new chapter in their lives. "So, Ethan, what's next?" Lily asked, her eyes twinkling with excitement. "You've got everything you need now. What will you do with all that free time?" Ethan smiled and looked across the table at his family. "I don't know yet, but for the first time, I don't feel the pressure to have everything figured out. I think I'm just going to live in the moment. Be present." Margaret chuckled softly, her eyes full of pride. "You've earned that, Ethan. You've earned peace." The three of them sat in silence for a moment, enjoying the simplicity of the moment. Ethan felt his heart full of gratitude. He had spent years chasing a dream, only to realize that the dream he was chasing was always right in front of him. Purpose and love. Ethan stands on the balcony of his apartment, looking at the skyline once again. But this time, he doesn't feel the need to conquer it. He just watches it, content with where he is, who he is becoming, and the future that lies ahead. For the first time, the city felt like home, and Ethan Walker, the once relentless CEO, had finally found his balance. His empire was no longer just about success, it was about legacy. And this, he knew, was just the beginning.